Folks, I don't know if you have ridden in a driverless car, but the one and only Coach Carson has. And I actually want to have a conversation about what that might mean for real estate. Coach, how you doing?
Doing well, Michael. Thanks for having me.
So I gotta ask, you're in Arizona, you're seeing some friends, some buddies. You request a car, an Uber, a taxi, whatever, and it shows up without a driver. What is your first reaction?
It was like I'm back to the future. It was
Uh,
crazy. There's I've been reading about driverless cars. I'm kind of a tech fan, and what's going on in the new tech, and with Tesla, with Google, with other companies that are I knew it's on the way. I knew that there's going to, we all, if you watch the news, it's 5 years out, 10 years out, a lot of cars will be driverless. But I was visiting some friends in Phoenix. There's actually a group of podcasting friends, and um, I went to the airport, and they're like, you should go take this one company called Waymo, and it's just completely driverless, and they have this big radar, like lidar, on the top of the car. It
right.
pulls up. There's no driver in the seat. You hop in the back. They know your name from the app, and the thing just takes off. The steering wheel is moving, and it literally like moved me forward in time, saying, wait a minute, like this is a real thing. It's
Mhm.
happening. And but beyond just the novelty of it, that's kind of interesting. It's one of those things that's going to change the way we approach using cars. And I already, my real estate investing philosophy is I'm very centered on walkable communities. I just think that's
Mhm.
part of the fabric of why, socially and exercise wise and fitness wise, it just makes more sense. And but
Sure.
so you can see how the habits of people and how they use transportation affect where they choose housing. That's already part of my central part of my real estate investing strategy.
Mhm.
But it just got me thinking, all right, if people can use cars that are driverless, there's no labor cost when it comes to taxis. What you have fleets of cars moving around. How does that change the landscape of the city? Do we have parking
Yeah.
garages? Do we have fewer parking garages? Do we have more apartment buildings that are closer to city centers? There's just a lot of questions, more than I have answers at the moment. But I thought it'd be fun to talk to you, since we brainstorm on this kind of stuff.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. You went to apartments in the city. I actually went to the single family home when I thought about driverless cars. And again, if we're playing future here, do we have garages anymore? Right?
Hmm.
Right? Do we have two or three car garages? Maybe you have one car and it's not, or a car garage and it's not for garage, it's storage. Right? I mean, because you could really play this out. And then again, the other thing that I think about is actually instead of being close to the city, why don't you go an hour and a half away? Because now your commute, you can be working. You could take a call, you could do conference calls, you could make that 90 minutes quote unquote productive. That
Exactly.
could be working hours. It could change everything.
Yeah, I think the outer suburbs all of a sudden become a normal thing. When it's like you're taking a train, right? People who live in New York, and
Yeah,
they live an hour from New York, they take the train and they work on the way. You could be doing that in Noonan, Georgia, where I grew up, 30 minutes from Atlanta, or even farther out. And
farther. Yeah.
yeah, what does that look like when you can? So the suburbs all of a sudden become relevant. What do single family house subdivisions look like? Obviously, the structure and where they put
Yeah.
their money is going to be different. Yeah, it's going to be, it's one of those changes that it's hard to foresee exactly how it's going to go, but I could see the suburbs becoming even more relevant.
Yeah, I'm just playing with this, right? Because again, I think your train analogy is right on, right? Unfortunately, trains or fortunately, whatever, they rely on tracks, which are straight. It's just kind of how it works. So if you're near that or a pick off and drop off, it can help you. But now if you have individual trains, call them cars, that can go anywhere at any time to any place, and you're free to work, that's an unlock, especially today, right? A lot of folks since the pandemic have, worked from home and all of that. We are seeing companies increasingly go, hey, we want you in the office 1 day, 2 day. That, like if you require somebody to be in 1 day, shoot, driverless car working on the way there and the way back, cheaper
Is
housing. It's,
is
it's,
is it
it's like,
is it even a perk? Like, you're trying to recruit, high value employees. You're like, all right,
yeah,
look, we'll let you come into the office 2 days. We'll even send a car to pick you up on the
yeah,
way. I mean,
we'll have WAMU pick you up. Yeah, exactly. It'll be a perk. You're right. You don't even have to pay for it. We'll spend the, I don't know, $70 a trip or whatever it is. That's pretty creative. So it'll I if driverless cars take off, it will absolutely change the real estate landscape, both in cities and in the suburbs, without question. I don't know how it does. So I want to go back to you on the at the airport. You're on the sidewalk. You call this WAMU app. The car shows up. It's the Back to the Future. Were you hesitant at all getting into this thing?
Should have been. I'm a little daredevil at times.
You're a little cracker, right? You don't care.
Well, actually, so the people I was visiting, just to give a little color context to this, was a guy named Pete Adney. I don't know if you've heard. Pete's Mr. Money Mustache is his
Oh
website.
yeah.
So he's a big financial independence blogger, and I was there with a guy named Carl Jensen, who's another blogger. So these guys are like super into Tesla, super into like they're engineer types, and we'd been talking about it all weekend, and just saying about driverless cars, and about they're just trying to tell me like, look, this is a lot closer than you think, and here's how it might impact things. Here's what, even we got into the conversation. We're all Warren Buffett kind of nerds. It's like, well, Warren Buffett's even mentioned that if driverless cars really fulfill this promise sooner, and think about insurance, like how car insurance basically pays for all these bad driving that human beings do. And if you have a lot safer, if once driverless cars take over, the reason they'll take over is because they're much safer.
Oh, no question.
And not that it's not gonna be a novelty. Like, I'm not one of those, like, we're going to be 100%, driverless cars. People are going to like to take their Mustang out and hear the engine go. And like that stuff's going to still happen. But if most car trips are taken because they're more convenient and because they're cheaper, like if you could take a Waymo or a Tesla, a taxi that's $10 and a regular old taxi is $40, like game over. Like it's not going to, So anyway, I guess the point is I wasn't as nervous about it because we were talking about talking about the LiDAR and the radar and how this stuff works, and it was just more of an interest. But it's also just an interest. It's just an exercise, and it viscerally brought me back to like, this is something we need to think about sooner than later from a lot of different perspectives, and it just kind of shook up my perspective on how fast things are changing.
I like it. So okay, I just want to go back. So you get in the car. It obviously successfully gets you from point A to point B. Was it smooth, herky jerky? Did you have any moments of, oh my God, what are you doing? Was just clean?
No, the acceleration was super smooth. The turns, it's almost like you're, when you have a 16-year-old driving with like in a driver's class, and the driver is like teaching the 16-year-old how to drive. And he's like, here, put your hands on the steering wheel here. When you turn, you accelerate slowly. It was like a textbook kind of driving. And I was a little nervous when I had to get over 2 lanes to get to, on a left turn lane, but it waited for one car to go by. It even was really cool. They had these maps in the middle of you could see on the dashboard. It shows basically everything like 360 degrees around the car. The person with the stroller on the sidewalk, like 15, 20 feet away, is this little green dot on the thing. So it's picking up all these like different things that a human being might not even see, like in your blind spot behind you. So I'm sure there's, I'm not like naive enough to think that there aren't things that have to be fixed, but it's pretty close. It's really, it was a very good experience.
All right. So you did a trial run. I guess the biggest question, would you be nervous doing it again?
No, I think in that context, the other thing I knew about this company is they are just focused in the Phoenix area.
Yeah.
They've basically mapped out every street sign, every tree on the side of the road, every nook and cranny. These cars know this area, but that's basically what's going to happen on a grand scale. You have these maps of the entire country. You can start rolling it out in little pods in cities where it makes sense, or on routes where it makes sense. So think about like a commercial truck is going from Atlanta to Orlando, Florida, and there's just this route that goes back and forth every day with like 3 turns. That's a no-brainer. Like that's easy. So the turns we took to the airport were nothing compared to some of the freight lines and other things that are going to happen pretty soon.
Yeah, very cool. Well, I do think driverless cars and other tech is going to have an impact on housing. I do think it will change this. I think cities will change, to your point, and suburbs will change it. And to your point, I think really where this started is it's actually sooner than a lot of us think. And that's stuff to ponder, because again, if you're in the kind of one rental at a time or small and mighty investor, you're playing a decade game, right? Probably multi-decades. So it's probably something we should think about. Would you say that's fair?
Yeah, here's one of my early hypotheses, just because we're going to all be talking about this, but already one of my ways that I analyze a market, where to invest, is I look at like a solar system, and I
Mhm.
say, all right, Atlanta, Georgia is the sun. It's the economic
Okay.
center. It's got 6 million people, tons of jobs there. And the sun produces the economic energy for the rest of the solar system. But
Okay.
we, as small, mighty investors, as one rental at a time investors, to invest in the center of the sun is pretty expensive. It's hard to make it cash flow. Like if you were to,
Yeah.
fast go from Atlanta to the West Coast, and I know you're a lot of California listeners here. If you go to Bay Area, that's the economic sun, or Los Angeles, that's the
I,
economic sun.
I like it.
Very difficult to invest in the center. But if you go look at these little planets that revolve around the sun, that whatever the level of rent to price ratio is in that solar system, you're going to find more affordable rent to price
Yeah.
ratios on and the planets that surround the sun. And this is already the case. Like this is already before we have driverless cars or any of that. I like to go like the Noonan, Georgia, where I grew up in Atlanta, 30 miles away. It's got its own little center. It's like its own little planet. It's its own little gravity. It's got its own. There's even a term for this that I've read in a book from a real estate consultant named John Burns called suburban
Oh.
locations.
Mhm.
SURBAN. There's suburban, but they have a little bit of an urban feel. They have some character. They have a town
Mhm.
center. Even better, if it's a historical town center that has walkability. So you have these little hubs and these little planets on the outside that still benefit from all the economics of the city, but they're more suburban, they're affordable, they're nicer places to live, not as crowded for families, for people who want to own a single family house. So that's where I like to invest. Like where I invest in Clemson, South Carolina is a little smaller solar system in the upstate of South Carolina. Clemson is like a outer planet of the Greenville, Spartanburg, solar system. But in that solar system, there's BMW, there's Michelin, there's a lot of tourism. So it's pretty easy to find good solar systems where the economic energy is really good. But I think the next step that a lot of people should look at is finding these little 20 to 50,000 person cities, these little planets that are basically commuter suburbs, and go ahead and invest in those locations. And if this hypothesis comes true, this even more beneficial to live in the suburb. You can go even farther out. There might be some opportunities for even further out planets that people weren't
Yeah.
even on the radar, that you can start getting ahead of the curve a little bit.
I think that analogy is awesome. So basically, if I were to translate this, because I've given this no thought, but if you can find a major city that will likely be mapped by one of these driverless car companies, WAMU, and I'm sure there's others, that is going to be the unlock to the planets, because that's going to create a very hot sun, to your point.
Mm-hmm.
But now with this technology, you'll be able to commute in and out. And it's really funny you talk about 20 to 50,000, because when I looked at the Bay Area way back in 2002, it didn't make sense. It really doesn't make sense today.
Yeah.
But I had to go 2.5 hours. But the only reason I had to go 2.5 hours is because I wanted a city over 100,000.
Mm.
There were cities that made sense that were smaller. And to your point, those might be a better play with driverless cars, right? They got character, they're clearly closer, right? So
They're
I
also
gotta
off.
put
They're off the radar. They're off the.
yes.
If you go
Nobody's looking.
50,000, nobody's looking at those. And it's not even economical. Like this is where you got to play to your strength. Like the small mighty investor is someone who only needs 1 or 2 properties a year, right?
Mhm.
And the big hedge funds, the big go 10x kind of buy a ton of units. It's just not economical for them to set up the
Yeah.
management infrastructure and to do all that in a small town. Whereas I love small towns. Like
Yeah.
I think small towns are where people want to live. The only reason they don't is because jobs, transportation, things like that. But this has changed. COVID changed that. People live out in the remote, they work remotely. So that's a big thing. Transportation's changing. I mean, lots of technology is making it easier to not live in the center. And I'm not like, I still am long on like big cities. Like I think New York City, I think Los Angeles, those aren't going anywhere because there's just a
Mm,
network effect of things that
sure.
happen and compounding. But I am big time long on the small and medium, the small city, the tiny little town that's in the sphere of these big economic centers. That's going to be the place where we are going to make money as small investors.
This is such a fun conversation, something I have not thought about. I have often ignored, just flat out ignored. And I won't do that again. I've ignored the small towns, right? If you were sub 50,000, to me, it didn't have an economic driver. But now, self-driving cars, the future is closer than we think. The economic drivers, the sun, proximity to the sun. So some of these small towns, again, will be ripe with opportunity.
Yep.
And I think that's a genius idea.
Let's try it out, everybody. Let us know if you're investing in a small town. Let us know in the comments, because
Yeah,
I'm a
let us
small
know.
town guy.
Yeah.
I invest in a town with less than 20,000 people, so I'm there.
Wow. Sub 20,000.
Yep. It's a little unique. Clemson University is there, 25,000 people in the university. So
Ah,
it's a little weird, but uh,
university town. Yeah.
I got my start in Easley, South Carolina, which is a 20 to 20,000 person town. You know,
Okay.
right, it's a suburb of Greenville. My dad and I started finding deals for my dad when I first graduated from college
Yeah.
in Noonan, Georgia, which was 20 30,000 people. So I'm very familiar with this demographic, with this type. But the key, I mean, the key here is like you want to live in those little small towns. People like that,
Yep.
but they commute it. Like your tenants. My tenants
Yeah.
commuted to Atlanta. I worked at the Atlanta airport, or they commuted to Greenville to work at BMW as a technician or an engineer. So
Yep.
like it always starts with understanding your target market and what they
Yeah.
want and what they're looking for.
That's a great unlock. I'm gonna add that to my bag of tricks. I think it's wonderful advice. I think the sun or solar system analogy is perfect. I think driverless cars is an unlock, but I did not make the connection to small towns. In my book, you are once again a genius for
Oh,
bringing that to the channel.
thank
Coach,
you.
where can people find you?
Coach Carson is my YouTube channel, so check me out there. I have a new episode that comes out every Monday, talking about this kind of stuff, but also running the numbers, getting the financing, how to find deals as a small and mighty investor. And then if you want to check out my book, it's called The Small and Mighty Real Estate Investor. It's on Amazon, it's on Bigger Pockets, it's on Audible, and I would love to connect with you either way.
Awesome, folks. Show them some love. Leave some comments below. Let us know if you invest in a small town and what the heck. Have you ridden in a driverless car? I want to know. Yes or no would be great. Thanks, guys. Take care.
Thank
Later.
you.